So I have wasted a lot of money on kayaks the last 6 to 7 years. So I realized a lot of these kayaks were literally just sitting here in storage, taking up space. So I'm selling these kayaks. That's right, I'm not joking. We're downsizing big time. And it might surprise a lot of people, but we're making some big changes for 2026. I'm gonna talk about some of the pitfalls of kayak fishing that I've learned the hard way. So I've spent the better part of the last 6 years chasing what I consider the perfect kayak setup, from river kayaks to big ones like this Hobie 360 Drive Pro Angler 12 to even big tandem kayaks like the Crescent CK2 Venture. And I actually feel like there's been kind of a shift in kayak fishing in 2026. And I'm gonna talk about why I think maybe you were making a lot of the same mistakes I was when I first really got into kayak fishing, and some of the changes I've made in 2026. So one of the myths in kayak fishing is that you can find a do-all kayak. And I was searching for that. And that's where I lost a lot of my money. I thought that there was a kayak out there that could do everything. Kayaks are more expensive than ever. This is what I consider the creme de la creme of kayaks. This is the Hobie Pro Angler with a 360 drive. And you guys have seen me make content on this kayak before, but I want to talk a little bit about it because I think it kind of sets the tone for the video. Now, we're selling all kinds of different kayaks. I've got some simple stuff back here like this Crescent Smalley, which is a great kayak, and the Crescent Shoaly, not selling that one. And then we've got some other ones below it like the CK2 Venture, but then you've got the Hobie. And we've reached a point where kayaks weigh 150 pounds before you even put a motor, a battery, a graph, all that stuff. You're looking at a kayak that now you have to trailer. Is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not. If that's what you want to do, by all means, do it. But I realized something. It's not something I wanted to do. I had spent all this money. I've gone from the very tippy top of the mountain down to the very low where it's just a paddle and this kayak with a seat. But one thing I learned along the way is there was a lot of things that I didn't really need. And I've made some mistakes that have cost me a lot of money, unfortunately. And consumerism is really hard to beat. You think that you're being practical, savvy, making the right choices, but at the end of the day, we always pick up these things that we think we need, you know, like a power pole. Like, how many times have you guys seen me use my micro power pole? But for me, the Hobie was a great kayak. It's super stable, it's comfortable, and it ran really well with a motor. But for all practical purposes, it was a serviceable quality kayak, but it's expensive. I mean, like I said, once you put the motor, the graph, and all that, you're looking at something where it's pushing into that $5,000+ mark, maybe even more. So that was something that really kind of just hit me, and I was like, you know what? I think I need to go a different direction. So what direction was that? Well, let's talk about it. On my search to spend all this money, I kept trying to find the perfect kayak. What I mean by that is the kayak that can go down a river, a kayak that can fish in a big lake, a kayak that you can throw a live scope on. And if you recall, I used to have this Crescent Shoaly, my original Crescent Shoaly, rigged to the teeth. I had live scope on it, I had a big battery in the front. I have done just about everything to this. And I think the Crescent Shoaly struggled in having a lot of that stuff on there. Wasn't designed for that. It was better as a throw and go type river boat type thing that could do bigger water if you wanted to, but it really didn't excel having a million different things strapped to it. And that frustrated me. I kept trying to basically put a square peg in a round hole with that boat. So then enter the CK2 Venture. The CK2 Venture was a bigger platform, but I realized that it was too big. It's almost 13.5 feet once you've got to load it down with mounts and all that. It is extremely difficult to truck bed load. Truck bed loading is important to me. I don't want a trailer. I realized that really early on. I didn't want a trailer. I see so many people over rigging things that I just didn't want to be that guy. And I was becoming that guy with the Shoaly. I was like, the Shoaly can't handle this. Let's try the CK2 with live scope, foot steering, and a stern mounted motor. While it did great, it didn't really fit what I was looking for because it was too long for the rivers. It was a pain in the butt to load in and out. So, didn't work. Enter the Crescent Smalley. Crescent Smalley is a great kayak. I still like it. This is honestly, like, if I could just have a kayak that I was gonna paddle around all day, this would probably be it. But I realized, guess what? I'm out of frame now. I am pretty tall. And the Crescent Smalley was uncomfortable for me being 6'3" when I'm in it for over like 5 or 6 hours. That was when I kind of reached the point where I was like, this is a little bit too much. I realized that in 90% of the scenarios where I would use the Crescent Smalley, I was probably better off using the Shoalie. I thought it was important to kind of walk you guys through where we started, where we're at, because I technically started at Old Town 106 pedal drive, and we've somehow made our way back to that. Whoa. Am I gonna get a kayak that's too heavy to move and it's just gonna rot in the garage? Or am I gonna get a kayak that's just way too light to go in the big water that I like to fish? Ask yourself that. So we're back in my garage with my 2 current kayaks. And I'm gonna say something super controversial to start this part of the video before we dive into a kayak that I think maybe is the closest I've come to what I would consider the perfect kayak. And that is, I think the era of the do everything versatile kayak is dead. It is dying, and we are seeing more and more people stop trying to do what I did with the Crescent Shoalie and load it with everything. And they're just skipping that step and going straight into the specialized kayak. Hear me out on this. Think about what we're seeing a lot of major kayak brands do. Come out with a big, giant kayak. So Crescent has even done it with the Crestcraft. Bonafide's got the XTR. Wilderness Systems has a big giant kayak. Feel Free just came out with a big wide platform kayak. You see where I'm going with this? A lot of big brands are coming out with the giant kayak so that you can just put everything on it, and truthfully, you're probably gonna have to trailer it. It is a huge trend in kayak fishing on the upper end. However, if you look, you see a lot of brands are also coming out with the lower end of the spectrum. A great example, one of New Canoe's best products right now is the U10. It feels a little dirty to call the U10 a simple kayak, but the reality is it's a 10'6" kayak that's open platform. You can rig it however you want. You could paddle it, you can put a motor on the front, you can put a motor on the back, you can put a gear pod, you can leave the gear pod out. But for all practical purposes, that's a pretty versatile kayak that really isn't that expensive. So we're seeing less and less of those middle ground kayaks coming out, more and more of the upper and lower end, which is something that I didn't think that we would see. There's always been this weird market where we try to design these kayaks that are essentially perfect for everything. It's like, oh, you want to go anywhere? Here's a kayak for that. Are there kayaks that can do that? Yeah, absolutely. And that's something we're going to discuss more a little bit in depth when we get over here to talk about this kayak. But I think one of the trends we're seeing is a lot of people are just skipping and going either to the top or bottom. They know what they want. Consumers are getting wiser than ever. They know that if they want to over-rig their kayak, they're probably going to need an XTR. If they want to stay simple, you see them buying stuff like the Crescent Smalley. So the choice for me to sell some of these kayaks and kind of pare down was a difficult one, but I want to talk a little bit about the over-rigging aspect to kind of wrap this video up. When I first started into this, I made the same mistake twice. And what I mean by that is I bought an Old Town 106 PDL, the Topwater 106 PDL. That was like 2018 when they first came out. That was a great kayak. I loved it. I took it on rivers, lakes, streams, Big Chop, Lake of the Ozarks, giant places. And then I also took it to skinny places, and I thought it did really well at that. However, I decided that I wanted a river kayak. And I bought the Crescent Shoalie when they came out, like I think 3 or 4 years later after that. One of the mistakes I was doing on the 106 is I was loading it down. I had a 12-inch graph on the front. I had a live scope on it. I had a Newport on the back. I had the pedal drive. It was rigged to the teeth, but it was cramped and small. And I was like, you know what? I am taking this to too many extremes. I over-rigged this kayak. So I decided to get the Crescent Shoalie when it came out, and lo and behold, I loved it. I was paddling it. I was catching fish out of it. And I was like, you know, this would be great for a Newport. So I did that. And that was awesome, and I fished like that for years. And then I decided to start fishing Bassmaster out of the Shoalie, and what happened? Well, I made the same mistake again. I started wasting money. I started over rigging it. Instead of just fishing out of my 106 that was already rigged, I put a graph on the front. I put a crossbar. I had a Garmin. I had live scope. I had my motor. And what did the Shoalie struggle to do? Well, it was way too cramped and way too hard to load. When you put 2 giant batteries in the front, plus I had boondocks on the back, guess what? That was a pain in the butt to load. The Shoalie is not known for having really good handles. And if you've ever used the Shoalie, you know it's got like a strap on the front. So it was a pain in the butt, even with the boondocks, because the boondocks is so far back, to load into my truck bed. So essentially I went from having a small over-rigged kayak to a simple kayak to another over-rigged kayak again. You see where I'm going with this? I made the same mistake twice, and I'm not making that mistake again. I still think there are a few options out there if you want kayaks that can do everything. Enter the 120 paddle. I'm just using this as an example. There are a couple of examples across the board of kayaks that I think will fit this niche, but this is one for me. I had fished out of the 106, like you've seen snippets throughout the first part of the video, for years before I even bought a Shoalie. And I finally got rid of it and I regret it. I was like, man, I really missed that kayak. The pedal drive wasn't something that I super wanted on the river. I know the 120 tracks well. The 120 paddle bare bones kayak, you can get this kayak for $900, which in my opinion is a steal. Sometimes I've seen it as low as $799 when it's on sale. For what it is, this has more features and ability and performance than almost any other kayak on the market for that price point. Because this kayak came out around 5 years ago, it's kind of like the last of a dying breed, because I think that even though they still sell it, it's got a lot of the philosophies of old. This kayak paddles and tracks super well, right? It's got really good primary stability, which means that you can stand and fish all day. The seat and cockpit is super comfortable. It's got a nice large tank well. It's got very nice handles on it. You see where I'm going with this? This kayak has a little bit of everything without being too much, and that's why I love it so much. I've been using it for about 5 months now, and let me tell you, as somebody who was struggling to fish long days, you're on the water as much as me, I wanted to be able to stand a lot more. The Shoalie has great secondary stability, and in my opinion, I never really had problems with the stability, but standing was a little bit dicey floating down the river or even in the lake, whereas this Old Town 120 does have more primary stability. It's a little bit more comfortable for me in the cockpit. And I've had less and less issues with back pain, you know, getting sore shoulders, fishing multiple days in a row out of this one, just because I am a taller guy. So I think that the perfect kayak doesn't really exist. You're never going to find a kayak that is going to do everything well. I've taken this in creeks, it's done okay. Would the Shoalie do better? Yes. I've taken this on lakes with chop and it did okay. Would the Old Town 120 Pro and the Hobie Pro Angler 12 that I have do better? Yes. So at the end of the day, remember, there's no such thing as the perfect kayak, especially now. You're better off getting the kayak that you think suits your needs the best. And if you somehow decide that you want to do multiple things, you're going to spend a lot less money if you get 2 kayaks that do those things exceedingly well than try to make one kayak that doesn't do something well do it all. So you need to ask yourself, when you're looking for the kayak that you want, am I going to truck bed this? Or am I going to trailer it? Am I going to run graphs? Am I going to take it in skinny water? There's a lot of variables there, and you're not going to find a kayak that's going to do all those things perfectly. I talked about how much I love this one, but I also showed you that this is it. As you see it sitting right here, it will look like this probably the rest of the year. I can't imagine making any changes to it where it's going to do anything that I'm trying to do in 2026 any better when it comes to rivers, small lakes, and backwaters. But then I sit here in this PDL Pro, and it's already rigged to have a stern-mounted motor. A black pack can fit in the back with a ton of gear. I could probably get 15 rods in this. I could put my live scope on it. If I want to go out and live scope bass in the middle of the summer in 25 feet of water, guess what? I've got a kayak that can do this. I don't have to force my river rig to adapt into a way that it probably was never meant to be. If you take anything away from this video, just remember this much. You always should build and pick things within your budget. That's a theme that I talk about a lot when it comes to fishing gear, tackle, organization, trips even. Stay within your budget because there are ways to always make this work for you without going over budget. And I'm curious if anyone's shared that experience, because for me, when I first got the Shoaly, I was loving it. I've always really liked it, and then I started putting more and more stuff on it, and I realized, like, this is ridiculous. Why am I doing this to myself? Why am I over rigging a kayak that in my mind I never meant to get to that point? I am here to tell you I have made a lot of mistakes when it comes to kayak rigging, and the best course of action for me is to keep things simple. Keep it simple, rig at your own pace, stay within budget. Those are the 3 tenets I've kind of taken in the last year when it comes to fishing in general, because I have gone to the top and I've come back down to try to simplify. So I'm gonna leave you guys with a final thought here to wrap up the video. Stop chasing the perfect kayak. Find a kayak that you're comfortable in, that you feel good about, that are going to fit your needs, and make it work. Don't over rig it, keep it simple. And remember, the kayak is the tool. It's not the kayak. The kayak does what you tell it to on the water, on the river. If you load it down with a ton of weight, it's not gonna handle well. If you put a bunch of wires and batteries and stuff in the cockpit, it might get a little cramped. If that sounds bad to you, it probably isn't a kayak for you. So keep it simple, stay within your means. And if you guys aren't subscribed to the channel, we're doing some awesome things out of these kayaks in 2026, some really amazing trips planned. So if you enjoyed this video, stick around. We're gonna do tons more rigging, fishing, gear, you name it. We do just about everything on this channel, and I hope that you guys will join me on this journey, and I'll see you guys next time on the water. I will say, this is probably my favorite accessory, and I got a lot of criticisms for this, but this thing has lasted me like 3 seasons now, the 13x13 black bag, and it holds my GoPro. Highly recommend.